comes to being on the homeschool, quote unquote, not theoretically, but
this is how easy the pendulum can change here. Now on Friday
in the league.
Maurice, you know I got receipts sitting in my phone. What was your score prediction before I even knew Charles? He and Wally Hall were great friends. And Charles can
foul.
Yeah, it's the same thing that happened after she shot all those free throws versus the Sky.
Get tossed out of the game. She'll shut this thing down if they officiate her.
The Indiana Fever is going to beat the snot out of 97% of the team. Harris, they got so desperate, they threw in Raven Johnson.
Getting around this, let me say this. You have
right out of the gate, Maurice pushes back hard on the idea that Iowa didn't prepare Clark for the 1BA, pointing out she carried real, nightly pressure to deliver for her team in a way some of her peers, like Paige Buchers at UConn, simply didn't have to. That's a fair, substantive basketball argument about roster construction and pressure, not just a hot take.
What happens against Connecticut and Seattle, that's not what a rubber meets the road. I mean, the moment of truth is, what are you going to do against Seattle? I mean, Minnesota. What are you going to do against the elite teams? And let me say this, Caitlin Clark did not play bad Sunday. She did not play bad at all. She was up against some people whose talent level was similar to hers, and they played better. But it wasn't that she...
This is a preview. And here's the actual media criticism angle driving this whole segment. The claim that Fearless went an entire 10-show stretch, from mid-July into early August, without playing a single Caitlin Clark highlight while she was averaging 29 points and 9 assists a game. That's a specific, checkable claim about editorial choices, not just vibes.
They still got 100. They're on record pace. They're scoring 100 more than anybody in the history of the league. Guess what? They're giving up 100 more than anybody in the history of the league. They can't do it on the other end. Here's the problem. Here's the problem in a nutshell. And here's why I disagree with Jason when he said Caitlin should be the best guard on the court every time. But no, Olivia Miles has got the equal talent. She's a supernova too. Now, can Caitlin go play it? Caitlin may very well light her up the next time they play. All right. But
she will. We take names. We take names around here.
The 45-point, 10-assist double-double reference here is completely real. Clark set that mark on July 17th against Seattle, the first 40-10 game in 1BA history, and it's confirmed by ESPN, Yahoo, and the league's own site. If a real historic performance like that doesn't get discussed on a major sports debate show, that's a legitimate editorial choice worth questioning.
July 17th. It's been 10 shows, I counted myself. During a 10-show stretch in which Caitlin Clark averaged 29 points and 9 assists, not a single highlight was played on this platform. It's insanity. And the point is proven over and over again. You would think, Virgil, after a 45-point double-double, something that's never been done in league history, we'd actually talk basketball. We didn't talk about it at all. You know what they wanted to talk about? Is Sophie Cunningham becoming as popular of a star as Caitlin Clark? You would think after a 27-point, 11-assist game, we would...
The frustration about fan-signed discourse getting more airtime than a 32-point, 11-assist game is a real, specific media priorities complaint. And it's the kind of thing that's genuinely worth holding a national sports show accountable for, regardless of how you feel about Clark personally.
School, but they never face a real challenge from anyone until they get to a certain point. Then the fact that they were still sheltered, despite the fact that they were out of the house, still can come back to haunt them in some way. And somebody who is homeschooled, they can be more socialized than somebody who's going to school, depending on what school they're going to and who they're engaging with. When it comes to a player like Caitlin Clark, many players, what happens in sports is a player, when they get exposed to challenge consistently of stronger talent, that's when they get forced to elevate and to contemplate their game. So Caitlin Clark could have played at Iowa the whole time just to see if she had some stronger players around.
The stats cited here, a stretch shooting 55% from the floor, 46% from three, 90% from the line, is the kind of efficiency number that would dominate coverage for almost any other player in any other sport, and the pushback about it getting ignored until one below-average game happens is a fair, pattern-based critique of selective coverage.
does have an impact. And if Michael Jordan were playing now, and some of these other athletes you were, Kobe was playing now in his peak right now, I think it would have some influence. Maybe not ultimate influence, but some influence.
Caitlin Clark has 3.9 million followers on Instagram, according to what I see. There's a cult of people against her. There's a cult of people for her. Everybody has something to say. All of you are noise, as opposed to
The free throw double standard call-out is worth sitting with, pointing out that Aja Wilson scored 36 points on 14 free throws with zero criticism about the volume, while Clark drawing contact gets framed as somehow suspicious, is exactly the kind of inconsistency that's fair to call out in real time.
And Charles and I have agreed, we've all agreed, the Indiana Fever, if you are a middle of the pack or a bottom feeder, you don't have enough to keep up. They can get away with murder on the defensive end. They gave up 16 offensive rebounds to the Seattle Storm. They'll get away with those things. We know they're going to run the bottom feeders and the middle of the pack teams out of the gym. They have not been able to beat the upper echelon.
Dre's homeschooled analogy is actually a thoughtful basketball point once you get past the loaded label. The idea that some players who never face real adversity in college can get exposed once real competition arrives in the pros. It's a real basketball development theory, not an insult, even if the framing got heated in the moment.
I know that Kylie McBride is a problem, but I think if Caitlin Clark is who you say she is, and who I believe she is at her best, they can beat the Minnesota Lynx, Maurice.
We're also skipping out on the fact that, to Charles's point, the Minnesota Lynx play both ends. The Indiana Fever, and this isn't just a Caitlin Clark thing. The ball screen defense, they don't know if they're blitzing. They don't, the big can't contain. I mean, Olivia Miles turned the corner, and I want to give Kelsey Mitchell credit, not just for the 37 points. I thought she worked really hard defending the ball.
The signal versus noise breakdown here is genuinely one of the smarter points in this whole segment. 3.9 million Instagram followers, a cult of supporters, and a cult of critics, and the argument that none of that actually matters compared to what happens on the court. That's solid, level-headed media advice for any athlete under this kind of scrutiny.
School, but they never face a real challenge from anyone until they get to a certain point. Then the fact that they were still sheltered, despite the fact that they were out of the house, still can come back to haunt them in some way. And somebody who is homeschooled, they can be more socialized than somebody who's going to school, depending on what school they're going to and who they're engaging with. When it comes to a player like Caitlin Clark, many players, what happens in sports is a player, when they get exposed to challenge consistently of stronger talent, that's when they get forced to elevate and to contemplate their game. So Caitlin Clark could have played at Iowa the whole time just as if she had some stronger players around.
The Game of Thrones hate watch analogy is a fair defense of tough love criticism. The idea that pointing out flaws in something you genuinely care about isn't the same as hating it. Whether or not you buy that as a full defense of the specific commentary being discussed, it's a reasonable framework for how sports criticism is supposed to work.
For Caitlin in the WNBA, and then address Charles's point.
I completely disagree with you. Caitlin Clark wore the pressure of, I got to show up and deliver for my team every night. You know, I can't have 6 points like Paige Beckers and win games at UConn, and nobody talks about it. So unfortunately for her,
the basketball analysis here is legitimate and stat supported. Indiana can run up the score against bottom feeder and middle of the pack teams while getting away with real defensive lapses, like the 16 offensive rebounds they gave up to Seattle, but they genuinely haven't beaten the league's upper echelon teams consistently this season. That's a real, fair critique independent of any media coverage debate.
When that team you saw is going to beat the snot out of 97% of the teams in this league. I just think everybody has to pump the brakes and calm down. Everybody just
here's what I'm going to say to that.
That's not true what you just said. They beat the snot out of 50% of the league. And then the other 50% they struggle with.
And here's what I'm going to say.
I'm talking about the Lynx.
I think the Fever can beat the Minnesota Lynx if Caitlin Clark is playing at her ultimate best. This season. I really do.
The free throw pattern argument gets sharper here, pointing out Clark didn't shoot a single non-technical free throw in a specific recent game, then connecting it to a broader claim that officiating tightens up specifically against elite defensive teams like Minnesota. Calling specific officiating fraudulent is a strong opinionated word choice worth flagging as opinion rather than a proven fact, but the underlying pattern of inconsistent whistle rates by opponent is a real, trackable stat worth investigating further.
School, but they never face a real challenge from anyone until they get to a certain point. Then the fact that they were still sheltered, despite the fact that they were out of the house, still can come back to haunt them in some way. And somebody who is homeschooled, they can be more socialized than somebody who's going to school, depending on what school they're going to and who they're engaging with. When it comes to a player like Caitlin Clark, many players, what happens in sports is a player, when they get exposed to challenge consistently of stronger talent, that's when they get forced to elevate and to contemplate their game. So Caitlin Clark could have played at Iowa the whole time just to see if she has some stronger players around.
And the closing basketball breakdown is genuinely solid analysis, crediting Minnesota's ball screen defense, Cheryl Reeves' coaching, and real roster depth advantages, while still making the case that Indiana's top 3 talent can compete with anybody if everything clicks. That's a nuanced, credible take, not just a hot take for the sake of engagement.
In the last minute and a half where you're playing possession for possession, one of them guards had to come out every time her team was on defense. And that's a problem.
That is a problem. Dre, you got something?
Defense wins championships at the highest level of, let's just say, basketball. A lot of people can put the ball in the basket. And sometimes you have bad days putting the ball in the basket. I'm sure Charles knows this as a coach. But there's no such thing as a bad day on defense. If you can defend, you can beat anybody because eventually good players will make shots.